All right, why don't we go ahead and jump in? I know there were some issues with the registration, so my apologies for that. Thanks for hanging in there and getting through. Welcome to the session today. If you would like, feel free to put your name in the chat box and where you're from so we can see who's attending today. Also wanted to let you know that the session will be recorded. So wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. And I am going to turn it over to Grace Araya from Illinois Action for Children, who's going to be facilitating the session today. Grace.
Thanks, Christy. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our session, Community and School District Collaborations, Collective Impact Approach to Support Young Learners. My name is Grace Araya, and I'm the Director of Community Systems Statewide Supports at Illinois Action for Children. In my role, we provide training and technical assistance to early childhood collaborations across the state, helping them to strengthen their ability to develop and implement community-wide collaborative strategies that improve outcomes for children and families. In a moment, you're going to get a chance to hear from our fabulous panelists, all early childhood collaboration leaders. But I did want to just take a moment and to define key terms and do a little bit of level setting before we kick off the conversation. And please feel free to share your thoughts in the chat or any questions that you might have, because we're going to periodically stop and take questions from you all for the panelists. And so I just wanted to define community systems development, because you'll hear us referring to it, or we might say, CSD. And so the way we define community systems development is a process by which community stakeholders take collective responsibility for the young children in their community by building an aligned, high quality, accessible system of early learning and development programs and supports that enables every child, regardless of race, income, zip code, to enter kindergarten safe, healthy, eager to learn, and ready to succeed. I know it's quite a mouthful, but we want to make sure we really got it all in terms of what we mean by community systems development. So I'd like for you to take a moment and think about what jumps out at you from this definition. What sort of key words or phrases jump out at you? You can just go ahead and put them into the chat. Okay, so it's a collective responsibility, aligned. Yep, collective responsibility. I love that phrase. That's really what stands out for me as well. And that sums up this idea that we're talking about and that we're going to continue to talk about during this whole session of community collaborations, is that taking collective responsibility for the children in the community and everyone, all the stakeholders coming together for that purpose. So collaboration, you'll hear us refer to collaboration as both a noun and a verb. And so it's a way of working, and it's an organizational structure that's really designed to address complex issues in communities that can't be solved by a single organization or sector. So when we're talking about helping children to be prepared for kindergarten, that's not something that one entity really is responsible for, right? It's not just the school district, it's not just parents, it's the whole community coming together around that. And so you need a collaboration, that type of structure to help you achieve that. And is characterized by a mutually beneficial and well-defined relationship that's entered into by two or more individuals, organizations, or systems. And the relationship includes a mutual commitment to shared vision and goals, jointly developed structure, and a clear and formalized roles for the participants, right? And where you're also sharing decision-making, because we are taking, again, like we talked about, collective responsibility and sharing resources, but also risks, which is important, and rewards. So that's what we mean when we say collaboration. And so I want to talk just a bit about the role of early childhood collaborations. And one of their main roles is to bring together a diverse membership representing multiple systems that serve young children and families. And as you can see from the image there, it's really this cross-system partnership that includes health, mental health, early care and education, and sort of other service systems that are involved in that. And they also manage an action plan that's data-driven strategies and activities to affect change, as well as including how you measure and track those progress. And family partnerships is a key part of the role of early child collaborations, right? Families being the leaders in building and maintaining that comprehensive birth to 5 system in the community. And really all this is done within that framework of thinking about how are we improving outcomes for children and families. So now that you got a chance just to get what we're talking about when we say community systems development, the role of early child collaborations, now we're going to have our panelists introduce themselves. And if you could answer the question, what critical role does your collaboration play in the community? And then what role does your collaboration play in supporting young learners and families? And just give us a sense of the journey of your collaborations. I'm gonna start off with John, if you could introduce yourself and then answer these two questions.
Sure, thanks, Grace. My name is John Borrero. I'm the Executive Director for the Collaboration for Early Childhood in Oak Park. It's a pleasure to be here today. What critical role does what role we play? Sometimes it feels like what role don't we play, right? We're involved. If we're successful, we're involved at many different levels. So one role that I think we play effectively every day is convener, bringing other people together, but also building the capacity of people in our community to do the early childhood work. I think it would be a misstep for us to go out into the community and think that we're going to have it all done, as Grace said, and that we're going to be able to meet every kid's need. But in order to meet the needs of kids and families, I think we have to be able to form those relationships and bring people together and help them in the work that has to happen with kids. I was looking at the graphic on the slide before this one. A thought came to mind that has to do with our role. Thanks. And all of these roles resonate for me. And one that I would add to that I think we see a lot of in our community, it's been a newer one for us, is what we've called community engagement or community education. We realize that we have a really strong role in making sure that people in the community understand the importance of early childhood. And so in addition to the people who need to be served by it, I understand that people who I want to engage in this work have to also understand what it means to be engaged in this journey.
Thank you, John. Let's go to you, Mary.
Thanks, Grace. Hi, everybody. I'm Mary Haley. I'm the director of the Addison Early Childhood Collaborative. And I think the practical role that our collaboration plays in Addison is to be a hub. We've literally set our organization up and we promote it as a hub for parents in particular, but also for all of the partners from the various systems that make up the early childhood world. So everybody knows that there is a central point of contact that they can go to. And, like John, when I was looking at the graph on that previous slide, I thought about that. We're talking about that from our perspective, where we live in this world, we know each other, we know what these various systems mean, and we know what working together cohesively can mean. But from a parent's perspective, especially a brand new parent's perspective, that's a really fragmented system that we're talking about. So our goal is to operate in the fragmented system, but really be the cohesive or the coherence that we create in the system so that parents know how to navigate better, and even so that the partners who work most closely with parents know where they can quickly go to get the resources the parents need.
Thanks so much, Mary. Like that's a visual, the hub, right? The community collaboration being a hub. Trish?
Good morning, everybody. I'm Trish Rooney. I am VP of Programs for Fox Valley United Way and also had the pleasure of leading the Early Childhood Collaboration, known as SPARK, for the city of Aurora. So what's nice about coming in as the third speaker is I think that John and Mary have really summed up the role of most collaborations, at least as both convener and the hub. We see ourselves in that role as well. For our community. And I often, and like my friends here, John and Mary have often heard me say that really I see our role as leading from behind, myself particularly. And what I mean by that is really supporting the community to identify gaps and challenges and bringing the community stakeholders together to identify how we might address those gaps and challenges with shared strategies. Always with the end goal of enrolling and of engaging and enrolling our families in early childhood programs and other services they may seek to support the needs of their families. One of the things that I think that we're most proud of in Aurora, we started our journey back in 2011. And the idea always was, what would it look like if a family had just had one point of contact rather than navigating this maze of services and these different entry points for services in the community? So that has been really one of the things that we're most proud of as a community is building the structure of this framework for families that they can access early childhood programs through a single point of entry. Thank you.
Thanks, Trish. So we can, if there's any questions, you all can feel free to put them into the chat. If you have any questions for Trish, Mary, or John. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the next set of questions, but feel free, like I said, to put in the questions and we'll make sure we pause and take your questions as well. Okay.
You know, Grace, I was gonna, if we have a minute, I was gonna add one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
That I think will be related to all three of us is that I know another, because of where we stand in the community, I think for all three of us, the conversations that are happening today around equity and around access haven't necessarily sort of engaged us. So I know that on our levels, on our leadership levels, we've really had to look at that and what that means in our community. So that hasn't been a historical role necessarily of our work, but I think it speaks to the way we have to evolve with what's happening around us. So sometimes that's meant looking at our systems and deciding whether or not we used to have a deficit lens and where we have to move to a strength lens, whether it means transitioning from looking at individual kids and looking at systems change and systemic responsibility as opposed to individual responsibility. So I think there are a few shifts like that I'm sure, I know I've spoken to Trish and Mary before about their experiences in their communities as well.
Yeah,
so
thank you for bringing that up, John. Oh, they're all coming in now. I was gonna, so we have a question from Evan. He said, I love the hub analogy as well. Have any of our collaboratives developed a visual of our early childhood systems, sort of like a graphic representations that show who does what and how things connect?
Yeah, well, you know, the state has actually a graphic of the various early childhood systems. And it's quite a maze and it's complicated. The early childhood system, I think I was going to address that later on, is a very complicated system. So if we were to create a visual for that, and Grace, I don't even know if you have the same visual at Partner Plan app. What often happens, and it's a powerful, actually it's a powerful graphic because you have this parent, and I often freehand it at meetings, who is looking into the early childhood landscape and not knowing which way to go because of of how complicated we are at the state level and locally. And you know, there's all these different entry points, all kinds of different services. And as a collaboration, part of where I see our role is helping parents, like I said, navigate, but also helping our programs to identify. I often ask, you know, how do you work in partnership to build capacity? How do we work in partnership so we're more effective as a community rather than duplicating services? So a lot of times, you know, the beginning of when I first started this was really mapping out who's doing what and how similar are they and how do I bring those particular programs together to talk about their similarities and at the same time think of the possibilities of how they could build out for capacity to serve more families and children.
Great, thanks, Trish. There's also another question that came in around that. So I'd love to learn more about how the one point of contact approach works. Both Trish and Mary discussed pooling services. Who are the stakeholders you involved and how?
I'll jump in and talk about that a little bit, Trish, and then you can add to anything that I might have left out. We originally identified about a half a dozen to 8 different sectors that we wanted to have in our cross-sector collaboration. So the obvious ones are early childhood education, family home child care, local community business or community and business organizations, organizations like the library, faith-based organizations. And really, after we defined those sectors, we just started reaching out individually to people in those organizations. I don't want to oversimplify this, but I want to demystify this for everybody a little bit. What we are doing essentially is relationship building. But if you think about relationship building and sustaining relationships long term, takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to make those connections and to keep the connections between one another really strong. So we just started reaching out to contacts within our world that we wanted to be a part of this, and started talking about how this could benefit them and the families that they service. And then just from a really practical standpoint, the way the central point of contact works has a bunch of different legs to it. As John mentioned, we convene stakeholders on a regular basis. We also work very closely with the different partners that work servicing parents directly. So I'll make a point of working and prioritizing those partners in particular. I'll also work real closely with the group of social workers that are in the school district in Addison, so that people are knowing that I'm kind of like the face of the Early Childhood Collaborative, and it's just a real practical, simple solution to have a central point of contact there. And the other thing that I would say, and this is a little bit addressing like the why collaboration, but when I'm talking to prospective new partners, I'll describe and use the analogy of we're conductors of an orchestra. So if you think about all the different people in an orchestra and all the different instruments, but everybody's got the same music because we're trying to play the same song, but everybody plays at different times, and there's different tempos, and there is different interpretation of the music depending upon what the instrument is. So we're trying to put together an orchestra, and we get to be the conductors of it, and it's really cool because collectively, the impact of that is so much richer than if you just listened to a bunch of separate instruments. So that's another part of how we're kind of like telling the story of what this is and what we're trying to accomplish.
Great. Thanks, Mary. We had another analogy and visual there for you all, an orchestra, right? Mm-hmm. John, this question is for you. Can you talk more about what it looks like to move to a strength-based model, and how have your goals and the work changed?
How about if I unmute myself first? And I know I got about a minute, so let me see if I can do that really quickly. But just to say that a big part of, so when we do our work and we look for evidence of the work that we do, and we look for how we use data and how we look at outcomes. It's a matter of looking at your outcomes and deciding what you're measuring. Are you measuring deficits? Are you measuring quote unquote what's wrong? Or are you measuring progress? Are you responding to things that you think are wrong in the community? Or are you aspiring towards a goal or a vision of what you'd like to see in the community? Where does the responsibility lie for the changes that you want to see? It's moving from saying, these kids have this issue with their performance, to this community has this responsibility to support all of these kids. And the obstacle to supporting those kids is this. It's working for us, it's been working with teachers to help teachers understand their role in that, and to help them reflect upon their practice and any unconscious bias that they might be bringing into the classroom, and help them give each child sort of an equal opportunity and to retain kids in the class. We also employ an early childhood mental health consultant, someone who goes into the classroom, a clinician who works with teachers to help them understand social and emotional development, and understand what they're looking at, and understand what might look like just problem behavior, and help them see strength in kids, and help so that the kids are retained and that they're able to sort of be supported through their journey. So I think it's multi-pronged, but basically the biggest shift is looking at how the responsibility moves from those kids or that other community to the larger system, to your neighborhood, to your city, wherever you're represented, to say you have the responsibility for making sure that all your kids are okay. It's not we're not pointing at particular kids. That's the shift.
Yeah, that's so important, right? It's looking at what is the system doing to sort of create these specific outcomes that we're seeing versus blaming those children and families, right, for those specific outcomes. I love that. Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about one of the roles that we know early childhood collaborations are critical in, and that's smooth transitions from pre-K to kindergarten. So how do you support smooth transitions from community-based settings to kindergarten? And then if you could also address what strategies and obstacles you've experienced. So let's start off with Trish for this one.
Sure. So admittedly, this is an area we continually to work and refine this relationship between community-based programs and school districts as far as kindergarten transition, and how we work in partnership through the collaboration is really about bringing the folks together, right? So hosting our community base, our school district, particularly our kindergarten teachers, to help bring an understanding and also a partnership to ensure that families have the information they need, the resources they need to have to make these smooth transitions occur. In Aurora, we have 6 different school districts, so this is often challenging just to even navigate, depending on if you're a family childcare or community-based program. But as a collaboration, a lot of our emphasis is really informing and supporting parents for these transitions. And one way we do that, and hoping to do that virtually this year, is hosting an opportunity for our kindergarten teachers to host a Q&A for families. But and that also benefits not just the families, it benefits providers as well, community-based providers, to have a greater understanding of what that process and what that looks like for programs transition. And as far as curriculum and practice, this is something we actually are, our plans were halted a little because of COVID and the pandemic, but we're working with Erickson so that there is this greater understanding of philosophy across early childhood programs of practices. This one in particular is early math and early literacy across the board, so that children, no matter what program they're enrolled in, there is same philosophy, same understanding of different practices and just high quality programming across the board. So that's some of the ways that we're doing it. But like I said, it's always a work in progress. And part of that is, we rely a lot on the relationships for the kindergarten teachers and the staff, and making sure that those relationships are strong.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Trish. Let's go to Mary.
Sure. We have in Addison, we have one school district. So life is a lot simpler in Addison than it is for Trish and John in their communities. In Addison, we have the pre-K programs and kindergarten all reporting into the same assistant superintendent. So that helps right there because they're all part of the same team that reports to him. And then we have the school district and Metropolitan Family Services, which operates our early Head Start and Head Start, sharing data on a regular basis with each other, and then also with kindergarten teachers. So all of that process is formalized so that everybody's used to sharing data with each other within the programs and then with the kindergarten teachers for the transition. So there's always formal meetings that are taking place each year. And then in addition to that, the district meets with the preschool providers to go over in depth how to register for kindergarten. So they're able to talk to the parents about that. And then we've got a very cool, I think, program that we just started about 3 years ago called Kindergarten Camp. And everybody that knows me has heard me talk about this so much because I've been so excited about it. But the district started this about 3 years ago, and it actually very well addressed one of the obstacles. So we were finding a lot of children coming to kindergarten that weren't engaged in the system, that the school district didn't know about. And we started doing kindergarten camp for about 4 weeks every summer. It's free, and it's obviously preparation for kindergarten for any kids who are going to be starting in the fall. And the first year we had about 75 kids register, and about 2/3 of that were unknown to the school district. So kindergarten camp in particular has been a really good way for us to address one of those big obstacles. And then we also hold kindergarten university every spring, so that we can have the kindergarten teachers presenting to parents and parents asking teachers about what to expect as well.
Very cool idea. Summer camp and kindergarten university. Okay, John, let's go to you.
Yeah, I support that idea. We have something similar in Oak Park. We call it Ready Set Kindergarten. And so it's a similar thing, and we've gotten great feedback from the community, and it enrolls us immediately. We open enrollment, and within a week we were closed. So that seems to be a really big need. And so Mary and Trish have covered a lot of the strategies that we also use in Oak Park. What I can add to those, I'm thinking about specifically, when I think about alignment, I'm thinking about specifically the transition from a preschool class environment to a kindergarten class environment. And we do a lot of work with teachers. And so one thing that we've used as a strategy is helping those two sort of communities, I'm going to call them, or people, find common ground, find common language. You'd be surprised, actually, maybe people on this call wouldn't be surprised, but you'd be surprised what a different world each person lives in and how differently they see their jobs of working with kids. It's not necessarily the case that kindergarten teachers and preschool teachers have the same understanding of kids. So we've done work in our community in helping sort of bridge that. Part of how we've done that is actually having forums or sessions where we invite both of them. So we invite kindergarten teachers who are part of the school district to meet with preschool teachers and have professional development sessions together. We've also done some work to elevate the voice of preschool teachers so that kindergarten teachers have a better understanding of what preschool teachers are bringing and what skills they're bringing. But it's been really interesting. I think just like anything else, it's been relationship building. It's helping them approach each other and work together with respect and humility, and understand that each of them has a very distinct, strong perspective on how to work with kids. It's been also the collaboration we've seen it as part of our role to have a strong relationship with the elementary school system in our community, to make sure that we're part of their meetings and we're part of their decision making, and that's worked pretty well, so that we can empower families in that process as they go forward. And then something that's come up recently, the last thing that I'll add is thinking, when you think about being someone who works in early childhood, usually you say, I work in 0 to 5, right? I think most people on this meeting would agree with that. But stretch for a minute, and what would it be like if we said we're really concerned about 0 to 6? Mm-hmm. We're really concerned about pregnant women, so before 0 through 5, and the transition over. Getting used to using that language and thinking about how we care about that first year transition over actually changes a lot in your thinking. Everything we do is so set in this 0 to 5 framework, and then kids hit kindergarten and we're done with them. So I guess what I would say, I would encourage people to start thinking, is there a way in your thinking, even the way you write for funding or for grants, or the way you do your planning, what if we didn't see 5 as like a cliff? And what if we sort of extend a little bit more so that we can maybe walk a little bit cross over the line, and maybe look at how kids are transitioning over. We were recently looking at writing for funding to support kids in their first year of kindergarten. So it would be a joint project between the school system and the collaboration to continue to offer that Ready Set Kindergarten program over the course of that first year. Things like that, that might just mean a little bit of a tweak of how we normally see our roles with kids, but it could be really powerful.
Yeah, and I have to echo John. At the same time, part of what we're trying to do in Aurora is helping, of course, our kindergarten, particularly our starting kindergarten, to understand, to think of their responsibility of also understanding and embracing what happens, prior to kindergarten in that preschool classroom. This idea of a lot, we were hearing that kindergarten teachers really didn't have an understanding or an idea what was happening in preschool classrooms. So there was this gap. And certainly play-based kindergarten has evolved and changed the landscape for these transitions has really helped. I have a friend, AJ McCree, who's at Naperville 203, who is a big advocate about this. And really it's helping kindergarten teachers to see that they have a responsibility in helping with that transition and from preschool to kindergarten. So, while yes, we need to think about an early childhood, you're right, John. I also challenge elementary ed starting in kindergarten to also have the responsibility of thinking of their role of supporting and understanding what happens in a preschool classroom.
One thing I want to jump in to, just to build on the thoughts that John and Trish talked about, we also will involve the parents in learning about the play curriculum in preschool. So just really about a year or two ago, we became very intentional about having preschool parents come in, and while they're taking a tour of the Early Learning Center, we're having each of the educators talk about the play-based curriculum in that classroom and talking very specifically about the connection between the play that they're doing and the learning that facilitates. And we feel that as we get parents better, more knowledgeable about the value of play, that also equips them to help their kids make the transition to kindergarten as well. They know philosophically why the play-based curriculum, and then there's the connection between the educators and the landscape, as Trish mentioned, continuing with play-based in kindergarten. But we also thought it was a great idea to get parents involved, and that's something that they have been so psyched about.
That's so, yeah, go ahead, John.
I mentioned before that part of this is developing common language, and something that occurred to me is that if you're in a community that has a Head Start program, for example, then it's a requirement of a Head Start program to have some sort of authentic assessment. But authentic assessment, having that tool, gives you common language. And I think it's important to use it. I recall in my past life when I did a lot of training of teachers saying that having good practice is only one part of being a good teacher. You have to be able to have language around it. You have to understand how to quantify what you do. And I think an assessment tool really helps us do that in the classroom. So having that in place in a preschool program gives you language that you can use to help kindergarten teachers understand what developmental milestones are being met, what's happening in the preschool space, and vice versa. So it doesn't always happen so consistently in private preschool programs. It's something that we're working on in our community and helping to support the private preschool programs and using assessment tools. But for those people who have publicly funded classrooms in their communities, you're going to have that, and you could use that. That's an asset that you can have to help this transition, to help both communities understand each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so having that shared language is really critical to that, having a shared understanding, right? What do we mean when we say certain things, and agreeing on what we mean by that? That's really key. I do want to bring in what's been in the chat about the summer being really key, right? So we know across the state, preschool enrollment has gone down by at least 30%, if not more, in some places. And so in thinking about that, for those that maybe didn't participate in preschool or kindergarten, how are you all thinking about that in your collaboration work?
I can start. So yeah, this actually came up. It's been coming up several times in our collaboration meetings, and really preparing for that, right? So we're actually going to be starting a campaign, and it's actually a reminder to our parents, with the idea, we always say there's 2,000 days till your child enters kindergarten. And actually, I was just sent the graphic, and I'm happy to share that. I think it'll be posted on our website at sparkaurora.org. So once it's ready, you guys can access and definitely use that. So we're really counting it down for just information sharing. John had shared earlier about part of our role is really raising awareness, right, about the importance of early learning and having our community be supportive that learning begins at birth. Um, and so part of the campaign is about counting it down and also getting closer to when your child is 4 and now here's registration and here your child is, how many days till the first day of kindergarten. But along with that is that we're really mobilizing as a community and this idea of collective impact. We want to be able to have opportunities for families working in partnership across school districts and agencies to participate in a wide array of activities, whether it's virtually, and if in the summer we're able to meet in small groups, wonderful. But so there will be activities offered to families all along supporting, especially our young learners who will be entering classrooms and may have never had an opportunity to be in a group setting. So the ability to offer families and children, particularly that little bit of experience before they enter kindergarten is going to be crucial. But also key to that is in our community, we really want to support parents and build their confidence to be their child's first teacher and to recognize that these little activities they do every day really are supportive of their child's learning and giving them both tools and knowledge to continue that in their home. So we're excited because the community is excited and our partner agencies are excited to all jump in and play a role in preparing our kids for this transition into kindergarten. And just overall in early childhood in all aspects across the continuum.
I think we have time for if one other person has anything to add on this topic, John or Mary, around what you all are, how you're thinking about preparing children, specifically thinking about that they may have not been in school, being impacted by COVID. Yeah.
I'm hoping you can hear me okay. I have an internet connection warning. My apologies.
No, we can hear you, John.
Okay, good. I do worry about those kids. I think this time before kindergarten is important and it's key. It's not just extra time. I think it's necessary time today for kids to be ready and for all kids to get to kindergarten and be where they need to be to progress and not start behind. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of, I think nationally, your average child, if they enter preschool, they enter somewhere between 3 and 4. I remember that, like for national Head Start statistics, that the average age at which a kid enters is somewhere around 4 years. So we get a good year, if that, to usually help develop kids. It doesn't help for this situation right now with COVID, but it reminds me of really the importance of looking at helping families find you sooner and maybe having initiatives where you reach pregnant moms or you sort of engage infants more. If families need more support and if kids need more support, or if you have a kid who has developmental issues and needs support around those, or if they will be engaged with an IFSP, you want these families to be connected to a system as soon as possible. So one way around this is sort of what you do when you miss a year is to have families engaged as early as you can. But yeah, I do, to answer your question, I'm worried about these kids who are going to enter now, which is one of the reasons why we've looked at support over the kindergarten year as well.
Thank you, John. I see that Mary's added that, for them, the kindergarten camp and kindergarten university will be the best way to connect the kids who haven't had the benefit of pre-K. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, and let's go to the next question for you all. And it's, what tips can you share about developing relationships across systems, such as early childhood education system and pre-K to 12 system? So what tips can you share? And then I did ask for participants, if you all could just share a little bit about how you're participating in collaborations. I think that could help to tailor some of the tips that our panelists provide to get a sense of where you're coming from and what your involvement has been in community collaborations. Okay, so let's start with you, Mary. What tips can you share?
Actually, I have to plagiarize John a little bit. He talked before about the importance of making sure that everybody's perspectives are understood. So just in terms of practical tips, I think it is making sure that educators from pre-K and kindergarten have the opportunity to meet on a regular basis. If you're so inclined and you wanted to position what you're doing together as teams as collective impact in and of itself, so that you could give them a concept that they can kind of rally around. That would be one way to like talk about what you're trying to do together. But it really boils down to fostering opportunities for them to strengthen the relationship between each other, sharing their perspectives so that everybody understands where the others are coming from, and keeping a focus on, instead of the differences philosophically in educational practices, keeping the focus on we're here for the children and helping them progress successfully. So I think John really already addressed this question so well, but just creating opportunities for people to get to know each other and work together regularly over time, and understand that we're all here for the common goal of helping the child. And then as much as you can facilitate these groups co-creating plans, that's really cool. I mean, that's the point of it all, being able to co-create the plans and the solutions that meet everybody's needs is ideal.
Thank you, Mary. So creating those opportunities to co-create, to develop those relationships over time on a regular basis. Right? And then we have Evan sharing that he serves as the backbone support for Early Learning Collaborative. And so at different points, he's been a lead facilitator. So in your tips, if you can share any tips that you have also for a facilitator would be great, as someone that's responsible for sort of convening a collaborative.
Sure. John, I can go. You want to go? I'll go. This is the fun part of virtual. We don't know who's going.
Yeah, I didn't say it, did I? Go ahead, Trish. You can.
Yeah. So yes, definitely in agreement with what John and Mary have shared regarding this question. And I also think, and I think my colleagues will agree, that part of our work is about systemic change, right? And changing in our communities the way we think, where early childhood is placed in education continuum. So there has to be a shared agreement that learning starts at birth and even in utero, and that mutual respect across the continuum. For us in Aurora, I mean, we started, we were in a way in that path because our collaboration came together because of our school district and the city of Aurora, responding to the challenges and the gaps that were being identified through different community forums. So, but even with that said, even as we're backed by the school district, and so is John, and so is Mary, there's still this gap, right? Beyond among the staff. One of our school district, for example, this past year, our early childhood staff went knocking on every elementary school, just asking how much they knew about the early childhood program in their district. And those principals didn't really have an idea, about, or even some didn't even know they existed, so that's an issue. And that's something, for my role as leading collaboration is that, having to speak to administration to say, well, while you're committed to the collaboration, there's this gap, right? That has to be addressed with your administrative staff, acknowledging and also sharing your philosophy that learning starts at birth, and this program particularly had a birth to 3 program. So that even, heightened that issue even more. But so it's continuously working on that relationship and looking for systemic change within school district. And so that's what I have to say about that as far as systemically.
Thanks. Go ahead, John.
And I can speak. So Mary and Trish covered it so well, the other areas. the systemic angle. I can speak more to the individual angle as a leader. I think that's some of what people might be asking for as well. I could say that as a leader, I take responsibility for how these relationships are formed and what the culture is in these meetings that we have. And I think you can do that. So I think there are two things that come to mind. One is when people have relationships with you or your agency, or these meetings that I talked about across systems like that, what do you want them to feel? So I think this might sound obvious, but I think it's important. You be responsible for everyone feeling respected. I think people have to feel like there's honesty, that there is humility. I think that's really important, that you don't have to walk into a room acting like you know everything. You just have to walk into a room knowing how you want people to feel in that room and to be treated in that room. If you can become that person in your community, then you'll have people gravitate to you, and you'll have people want to attend your meetings and want to be part of the relationships that you form. So respect, humility, integrity, mean what you say what you mean. People should be able to rely upon your words and upon what you say. And then one thing that I try and do, as hokey as this may sound, I feel like when people leave a room, I want them to be aware that when we were there in the room, that we brought children into the room somehow, that we were the people to make sure that children were part of the conversation, that we were unapologetically child focused. That's a term that I use a lot in my work. And everything you do, be unapologetically child. Never be ashamed or afraid or concerned about being the person in the meeting who brings up kids. Make sure kids are there. You can be that person. And when people leave, they should understand that you are that voice for kids, that you represented kids, that you're not alone in a meeting, and that'll help you when you form these relationships across systems. And that's also the common ground that you have, no matter what different curricula or perspectives people have. All of these people in the room from early childhood through 12th grade care about kids. They care about how their kids do. If you walk in with that as your main tool, as the sort of the song you're singing, then everyone will be able to sing along.
Thank you, John. You've always modeled that so well to remind us, the children that are in the room with us in each session. And so even as we have this conversation, we know there's so many children that are impacted by what we're doing in the community. So thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, Trish, Mary, and John, for your wisdom, your insight, and just sharing your work with us. Jim, I just want to call attention to Jim's comment. He said that he'd also encourage connecting with PK to 12 school board members so that they know what's happening locally and how they can be supportive, right? And also what else can be done. And then also Trish commented about the needing to have modesty and humility in this work. So we'd love to just open it up now for the participants. If you all have any sort of questions, comments, or anything that you want us to talk a little bit more about, or you have to contribute from your experience and insight, feel free to unmute yourself or use the chat, whatever you're comfortable with, to share. So we invite you to do that. Oh, Christy brought up a good question. Can you
Always
talk a bit more about funding and staffing for this work?
Yeah.
Fun topic, yes.
Fun topic. Christy, always with a good question. And the important question, right? So, a lot of collaborations come together organically in communities and often start off as volunteers or folks in the early childhood, that are in early childhood come together because of identified issues. And that's wonderful. But I will say, and I started that way, I started coming to the table, but to really move this work along in collaboration, you do need backbone support. You need a backbone agency, I think. And you'll need funding for dedicated staff. For us with Spark, we employ 2 full-time family engagement coordinators, and then myself. I'm split between United Way and the collaboration to oversee the work. And as far as funding right now, it's privately funded. We do, yes, get funding from our school district and the city of Aurora, but most of our funding is philanthropic. It's community systems is new to most funders. So there's a lot of conversations that happen to explain what we do, how we do our work. And then once it's understood, I have to say, we really have our champions in the funding world who really see the value of that collaboration can play in a community to advance, equity for sure for families and children, but also in support of the overall vision for the state for families and children as it relates to early childhood.
And I think we have a little bit of a unique model, so I won't go too far into that. We're a public-private funding, so we have a good amount of local government money, and we also have a good amount of private funding. But what I can say, here's a tip that I can share that we've found as we've looked at our fundraising over the last couple of years and become more successful, is that we've seen that the better you are at delivering your message and delivering a narrative, the clearer your message is, the more successful you'll be at getting funding. So if your board, if your constituents, if your staff, if your volunteers can deliver, can say what you do in 2 to 3 sentences, then you're on your way. If you can't today tell me what your collaboration does in 1 to 2 sentences, then you have to do some more work to clarify and to sort of drill down on what your main goals are. And once you get there, I think it opens you up and makes it much more easy for you to be funded. I think it's harder to find funding if your message isn't crystal clear. That's something that we've seen. The work that we've done to clarify our messaging has really helped us access funding.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Mary.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mary. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, with regard to staff, I'm at right now, and the majority of our funding is from a private foundation, but we also have funding from the school district, and we're looking at potentially some other programmatic funding from other pre-K programs going forward. But just to build on John and Trish's point too, I think if you can articulate to prospective funders the complete value of the partnership, that can really be compelling, because they're not just getting the return on their investment, they're getting the return on collectively all of the organizations that are contributing to the work, their time and the outreach that they're doing, and all of the families that they're reaching. So if you can put a value on that in your conversations, I think that's important. And I think too, a lot of private foundations want to know that you're not going to become dependent upon them. So if they see that you're able to broaden and diversify your funding stream by telling that story, I think that is also a real positive approach.
Thank you, Mary. I have one last question for you all. How long did it take for your collaborations to start seeing outcomes and successes?
Wow. You go first, John, because you have the longest collaboration.
Well, yeah, I think everyone has their own journey. We started off as entirely volunteer run. In 2002, we became a 501c3. And then we brought on our first staff member. It preceded me, I want to say it was 7 years ago. So there was a whole period of time in there where it was really just volunteer run. It was this complex network of people in the community who wanted to make sure this happened. But I actually think that paved the way to our success today. I just heard a speaker, her name is Rachel Gianni, and if you've seen the movie No Small Matter, you know her as one of the teachers in there. But she gave this great quote that I'm going to butcher, but it's she said that no matter how beautiful your house is, no matter how beautiful the floors are, if the foundation or the basement of the house is not in great shape, your house is not going to be strong, no matter what you go forward. So I think more important than whether or not it's funded or not, is whether or not you take time at the beginning of your work to really establish buy-in from everyone. I think we did that. So it was a long journey with just volunteer work of having staff. We hired our second full-time staff member 3 years ago. So it was a slow period of growth And now we're accelerating, but we had to have that period of growth at the beginning to get to where we are today.
Thank you, John. And then this goes right along with that, but there was a question about how do you measure collaborative outcomes? So how long did it take you to see outcomes, and what were those outcomes, and how did you measure them?
I'll jump in. We, like John and Trish, our group started with volunteers for the first couple of years. So it was an unfunded initiative dating back to like starting in around 2011, 2012. And then I would say it was a couple of years after that that we started to see some impact of the work that we are doing. And right now, what we focus on in terms of measurement is capacity building in the community. We also focus specifically on the number of children that are getting developmentally screened and the referrals that are an outcome of that. And then we also measure family and parent outreach.
Mm-hmm. So is that Eileen's question? Eileen, I'm going to send you a link too off of our site. So how we measure, we were really fortunate when Spark started, Innovation Zone kicked in through Race to the Top, and we happen to be an Innovation Zone community, and that's how we were able to test out this idea of single point of entry. But so we measure, just like Mary says, but I always say to folks, how do we measure our work? We measure by how we leverage resources and to families and children. And by that is the referrals that we make to our partner agencies, our schools, our programs. And then we also measure further is the completion of that referral into enrollment. So that's one way. And then capacity building. So
Trish, sorry, you're gonna have to say it really quick because we're at time.
Yeah, and then capacity, and then just overall, how effectively now does your community work for families and children? So those are the three areas, and I'll send you the link to that, Eileen. So maybe someone can send me Eileen's email address.
Yep. Thank you so much. Eileen says she's going to reach out, so that's great. Okay. We have all the contact information. Thank you all so much for being a part of this conversation. Really appreciate you taking the time to do that, and please feel free to reach out with any questions that you might have. Thank you. Thank you, John, Mary, Trish. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.